It's Klayton, aka Celldweller, and I'm here in collaboration with Vintage King to talk to you today about the Moog MiniMoog Model D synthesizer. Now you may be thinking, deja vu, I feel like I've already heard you talk about this, and it's true. The morning that they announced this and made it publicly available, I was on site at Moog Fest and got my hands on it, and my video is up on my channel and will be linked. But in the words of Randy Quaid,
"Hello, boys! I'm back!"
So there's probably no real need to reintroduce you to the MiniMoog because it's been around for decades and it is permeated popular culture, and you've heard this synth whether you knew it or not. So what I want to do today is jump into some of the new features they've added in the 2016 model because I'm pretty excited about them, and I know you will be too. Let's take a look. This synth is not an emulation of the original Model D. This is an actual complete rebuild to the specs of the original 1970s version. And I own one of those and I love the sound of it, but they've added some features that don't affect the sound whatsoever, but gives so much more functionality to the modern synthesist / composer. So the new keyboard responds to velocity and aftertouch. You've got MIDI I/O, expanded CV I/O, and more. Let's look at some of this stuff. So as a quick for instance, I'm going to take a clock output from the Make Noise Echophone and go into the trigger input of the MiniMoog. So as you can hear, as I'm changing the speed of the clock on the Echophone, it is driving the amplitude envelope of the Model D. So the expanded CV in and out is both pitch and gate, so this makes this a really handy MIDI to CV converter and makes this really functional if you have other modular gear you want to integrate into the Model D. So they've expanded your modulation sources, which is really handy because they've added a new LFO which has 2 waveforms, and there's also an external input for a modulation source. So I'm taking this LS1 light strip and feeding it into the modulation input, and it is driving the filter cutoff, which you'll hear. So to show off some of the new keyboard functionality, I've taken the aftertouch or after pressure output and patched it into the filter cutoff. And you'll see the harder I press on the keys, you'll hear the filter open up more. So another great addition to the keyboard is velocity sensitivity. And so I'm taking the velocity output and I'm patching that also into the filter cutoff. And I want to show you some examples of how this will make this much more expressive. So I'm sending MIDI to the Model D from my DAW. And I created a MIDI region that has velocity going from minimum, ramping up to maximum, and back down to minimum. And you're going to see and hear that effect as velocity is being patched to the filter cutoff. I wanted to show another expressive and musical example of this, and so I threw some drums from my sample-based instrument Transport to make it sound more like a track, and I randomized the velocity of this bass line, and you'll hear that it becomes a little more dynamic as you play this back. In the original Model D, you needed to use your third oscillator as a modulation source if you wanted to do that. And they've now added a separate LFO with 2 waveforms so that you can continue to use 3 oscillators at once and use a completely separate LFO as a modulation source. So here, let's listen to some frequency modulation. So right now, you're not hearing any modulation because the mod wheel is all the way down. But as I increase this, you're going to hear this LFO modulating the oscillators. So you can get as crazy as you want. And there are 2 waveforms. When this knob is down, which is its default state, you've got a triangle. And when you pull up on this knob, you get a square. So another old school feature of the original Model D, and of course is still intact here, is your external input. So you could process drum loops, other synths, whatever you want, into the external input through your filters and amp envelope of the Model D. But you don't necessarily need to send an external source in. If you don't, the Model D actually takes the output of its internal oscillators and folds it back into the input path and creates overtones, distortion, and you'll hear a warmth. So if you turn this rocker switch on for your external input and adjust your volume, you're actually adjusting the amount of volume that is being sent back into the mixer path. With that rocker switch off, now let's turn that rocker switch on. Thanks for sticking all the way through this episode of Celldweller Production. If you want to grab yourself up a Model D, head over to vintageking.com and order one. There's lots more content like this coming to my channel, so subscribe to my channel or save this playlist so you don't miss a thing. And until then, this is Klayton, aka Celldweller, signing off.